You know, our legal system was built for a different world. It was designed to react, to be deliberate, to be stable. But now we're living in an age of AI, where problems pop up faster than our laws can even begin to comprehend. And that brings up a really critical question. Is our legal system just running a little slow, or is it fundamentally mismatched with the breakneck pace of technology?
And this slide, well, it really gets to the heart of the conflict. On one side, you have law. It's all about precedent, stability, and its processes are intentionally methodical. And on the other side, you've got technology, which lives and breathes speed, constant iteration, and, disruption. This isn't just a minor delay we're talking about. It's a deep, structural clash between a system designed for control and one that's built for constant, relentless change.
So, this brings us to the big question, the one that's going to frame everything we talk about today. In a world where technology is becoming more and more predictive, can a legal system that's built from the ground up to be reactive actually survive and stay relevant?
To figure that out, here's our game plan. We're going to start by defining what we call the acceleration gap. Then, we'll dive into the forces that are actually making that gap wider. We'll take a look at a global comparison, explore 3 potential futures, and finally, we'll talk about what it takes to move from just reacting to actually predicting.
All right, so first up, the acceleration gap. This is really all about that fundamental problem of pace, that structural clash we were just talking about.
This clash creates something that policy experts, like the ones at the OECD, call a governance gap. And this term just nails the issue perfectly. It's that space where technology moves so fast that our regulatory frameworks are just left in the dust. And the result? Well, harm often happens long before any preventative rules can even be drafted, let alone put into action.
But this gap isn't just happening by itself. Let's really break down the specific drivers that are actively pulling these two worlds further and further apart.
The first driver is just the sheer scale and speed of AI deployment. I mean, think about it. AI is already deeply woven into huge, high-stakes areas like hiring, healthcare, and finance. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, for example, has been sounding the alarm that algorithmic lending can copy and even amplify existing biases, all while any kind of consistent oversight is either missing or totally fragmented.
And second, our regulatory systems themselves are all over the place. In the US, for instance, you have this patchwork of different agencies like the Federal Trade Commission and all these other sector-specific regulators. Their authority often overlaps, and what that creates is enforcement gaps, inconsistencies, and honestly, just a lot of confusion. It's a perfect recipe for things to fall through the cracks.
Now, this third driver is a big one: economic incentives. The market gives massive rewards for being first and being fast. This creates this incredibly powerful push for companies to launch products and just operate in these legally murky gray areas, grabbing up market share way before any clear rules are ever put in place. Speed is rewarded, while regulation is just left playing catch-up.
And finally, we've got the destabilization of liability. This one's tricky. Our legal system is always dependent on a clear chain of who did what to assign blame. But with autonomous systems, that chain just shatters. When an AI makes a bad decision, who's at fault? The developer? The person who used it? The company that supplied the data? Because it's so hard to answer, we've started relying on soft law, like the NIST AI Risk Management Framework, which are great guidelines for sure, but they're often voluntary and don't have any real teeth.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. This isn't just happening in one country. Different parts of the world are tackling this in completely different ways, and it's turning regulation into a kind of geopolitical and economic arena. And this table just lays the contrast out so clearly. On one side, you've got the European Union. They've gone for a centralized, proactive approach with their big EU AI Act, which tries to regulate systems based on how risky they are. The goal there is governance and getting everyone on the same page. The United States, on the other hand, is much more fragmented, much more reactive, really prioritizing innovation and competition above all else. These aren't just minor policy differences. They're competing visions for the future of the entire digital economy.
So with all these forces pulling in different directions, where is this all headed? Let's game out 3 potential futures for how we govern technology in this age of acceleration.
So, first, there's a possible future where regulation itself becomes fully adaptive, using AI tools to monitor what's happening in real time. A more plausible scenario, though, is that the current lag just keeps going, with governments only really stepping in after some huge crisis or scandal forces them to. But the most probable outcome It's likely a hybrid system, a messy mix of our old-school reactive laws patched up with predictive tools and private governance, like internal company rulebooks.
But look, that probable future isn't set in stone. There is a path forward, but it's going to require a fundamental change in how we think about all this. We've got to move from just reacting to actually predicting.
To build what you might call anticipatory governance, we need 4 key pillars. First, we have to establish clear, predictable rules for who's responsible for AI systems. Second, we need to align the economic incentives so that being compliant is rewarded, not just being fast. Third, our regulatory bodies have to integrate technical, legal, and ethical experts. And finally, and this is the big one, we have to start treating law as something that evolves alongside technology, not as the cleanup crew that shows up after the damage is done.
And that brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from all of this. The legal system isn't failing. It's actually working exactly as it was designed to. It reacts to harm, it sets precedent, and it creates stability. The problem isn't the system, it's that the entire environment around it has radically changed. Harm can now happen faster, at a bigger scale, and often invisibly, long before the system can even register that something's wrong.
Ultimately, the future of our legal and regulatory world isn't going to be defined by how well it responds to the last crisis. It's going to be defined by how well it can anticipate the next one. Because the question is no longer whether disruption will happen. The question is whether our laws can evolve fast enough to meet it.